Hello, everybody, and welcome back. This is Inside the Force. Dave Cottingham here, and joining me on this episode is Hannah Burr. How are you, Hannah?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing great. How is quarantine going for you?
It's getting to me. I'm an introvert, and it's getting to me.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting.
And you?
Hannah, like everybody that's on this show, we all work together, so I kind of know what you're up to. But there's a lot of work-wise anyway. But there's a lot. How was your big question though? Is how was your Star Wars Day? What did you do for Star Wars Day?
For Star Wars Day, I finished the Clone Wars, and then as soon as Zach got home from work, my husband, we just talked a bit of Star Wars, and then he had to go to bed because he woke up early, and I stayed up and watched Empire Strikes Back.
Nice. Empire Strikes, is that your go-to?
That is my favorite.
Okay, good. Okay, nice. Which is a interesting topic because the main reason Hannah is joining me on this episode is we have been talking for the last few weeks about doing an episode where what we're mainly going to talk about in this episode is we're going to compare the Rise of Skywalker from the book versus the film. Now, this is interesting because when we get into this, I rarely do this. You're a reader, so I'm pretty sure you've done this a lot where you've read books that you've seen the movies. I don't really do that. I don't really read. I like just watching the movies, right? So, but in Star Wars, I do read the books or I listen to them. And I've done The Force Awakens, I've done The Last Jedi, and now I've actually done Rogue One as well, and Solo. I've done all the books for the movies. I will say though that this one, to me, was significantly more important than what my experience with the film. And just a rough preview of what I'm going to say. I don't know how you felt about it. Is that?
I completely 100% agree. Last time I was on your podcast, I mentioned that the book was better than the movie. Mm-hmm. It's just confirmed. The book is better than the movie.
Okay. So we are going to get into all the reasons why here soon. First up, though, as always, there's a lot of rumors and news out there. We'll just breeze through them because, again, I know a lot of people come back to us, but if you're joining us for the first time, we do like to talk about some rumors briefly, but not really get into it because it's not confirmed. So nothing from Lucasfilm, again, has been confirmed. I think last week we talked about the only confirmations were Taika Waititi is actually confirmed to be developing a Star Wars feature film. You happy about that, I guess?
So happy. He is brilliant. He is so brilliant, and I think it'll bring a nice layer of that old wit that Star Wars has with a nice balance of comedy and drama. So
yeah, I think the only thing I do like Taika a lot because I think visually, even though I'll be the first to say, I wasn't that impressed with Thor Ragnarok. Like,
really?
I was not. Only because, and I say this only because it was such a different tone than the first two Thors.
But
I disagree because I liked the first two Thors because I liked Thor as being that character, that serious, godlike character, and I was more intrigued with the Asgardian side of things, and this is not a Marvel podcast. Sorry, we're getting into this.
Sorry.
but I did appreciate his take on it. I did appreciate his visual style. I think he's a very visual director, although he comes from the comedy background, right? But so I am intrigued by that, and of course, I love what he did with the Mandalorian. So I definitely think he's more than capable of doing a great Star Wars film. There is that little bit of concern. I don't know if you've thought about this. There is that little bit of concern of what they did with Chris Miller and Phil Lord because they were kind of being comedic with Solo, and they got the axe.
They shouldn't have, though.
Probably not, but we don't know. We don't know fully the circumstances.
We don't know.
You know, if they were really, truly trying to ad-lib and change the story, those are rumors. We don't know. But, you know, I do think that I hope that they agree with what they are going to make with him before he actually goes and makes it, because then I think it'll be okay. But, you know, that's kind of where I'm at with that. So in lieu of that, though, that's the confirmation side of Lucasfilm. The non-confirmation it's kind of going around this past couple weeks. Katee Sackhoff, who is a tremendous actress. She's kind of she's been a lot of in the pop culture world a lot with Battlestar Galactica. She's on the Flash television series as a supporting character. Did some other stuff with DC, but she has been also the voice of Bo-Katan, both in the Clone Wars and in Rebels. The rumor is that she now has been casted, she herself, for the live-action version of Bo-Katan. Now, I don't know if you've seen it online, but they've shown pictures of them. I mean, she does look like her. So what do you think about that?
I just think that's a smart move personally, because you already have someone that knows the character inside and out in 2 different series. Mm-hmm. So that's just a smart move on Disney's behalf, on Star Wars' behalf. Whenever it comes to casting, I try not to judge ahead of time because you never know. But because she already knows the character inside and out, that's smart, that's right, and I'm so glad they're doing that.
Agreed. You know, I do think back sometimes. I'm like, I wish that if we know, maybe we don't know or ever know, but I wonder if when George went into producing the Clone Wars, did they ever approach Natalie Portman, Hayden Christensen, you know, about doing the voices for them? I mean, I don't know if they thought you could never afford them. Maybe they did and they turned it down, because I've heard through rumblings that Hayden was asked, you know, would he have done the Clone Wars, and he said he would have. So it's like you wonder if they were asked to do that. So you have something like this that, you know, well, and I was kind of comparing that because that's kind of going from live action to animation. Mm-hmm. Now we're going from animation to live action, and I've noticed, I don't know if you have, but I've noticed that it seems like when they're casting for animation, they still try to get people that actually look a little bit like the character. You know what I mean? I think Rebels did that incredibly.
Oh, yes. And I wonder if part of it is because when they're in the voiceover booth, maybe they're trying to read the facial reactions, get inspiration for the animation. Mm-hmm. It's not motion capture.
Right.
For the most part. But and maybe it's if you get someone that has a similar facial structure, similar appearance, it helps inspire what their facial reactions and their actions will be based on what they do in the recording booth. That's I don't know if that's what they do, but
yeah,
that's my opinion.
No, yeah, that makes perfect sense, and I think that's why I'm a little weirded out by that, because I think about this thing, it was last week we talked about Sabine being I mean, look, it seems like everybody from Rebels is getting casted into Mandalorian right now.
Yeah.
So we don't know what's true or not, but like Sabine is being casted apparently, and there's rumors that it's this WWE female wrestler that I'm not really familiar with, but you know, she has like the colored hair and she's got the sharp jawline, so she looks like her. But I do think Tia Sakar, who played her in Rebels, looks like her also, and could actually pass for Sabine. So you wonder who, and she's been in some live action movies lately. So you wonder, you know, what the decision making is there a little bit about whether or not how much they could qualify to be live action. Maybe they screen tested them and they said no. I don't know. You just never hear about that though. So, but Katee Sackhoff, you know, she's she's really good, and I think she's going to be, if this is true, that she's going to be a great Bo-Katan.
Agreed.
Another name flew out there. Now, who they're playing hasn't been revealed or talked about, but actually one of my favorite actors, Timothy Olyphant. Now, if people don't know who he is, he kind of made his breakout with Scream 2 way back in the day. That was when I was younger. I don't know, Hannah, how old you were then, but I was big. Scream 2, I think, was 9.
I was joking. You didn't have to say.
Oh, well, it was like 20 years ago. I grew up, I was in college, I think, when Scream 1 came out. And it was so good. It's the genre, because it kind of made horror. It was like a horror comedy almost, like it made it fun almost, which was weird because it was still kind of a slasher movie, but it was like an up-to-date slasher movie, right? Because you were stuck with Freddy and Jason and Mike Myers and Hellraiser and all this stuff, and then all of a sudden you get Ghostface now, and he's kind of a clumsy. You've seen all the Scream movies, I'm assuming, right, Hannah?
I've seen like trailers and bits and pieces, but I have not sat down and watched the Scream movies.
Wow! Oh man,
I am.
These are Wes Craven classics. You got to see these.
I'm slowly getting into horror. Okay, it's not my favorite genre.
Anyway, so Timothy Olyphant, he's in the second movie. He's done several other movies. Obviously, I was a big fan of the show Justified, that he was a part of. It was based in Kentucky, even though it wasn't filmed in Kentucky. He was in The Girl Next Door, which was a very, very good movie. Anyway, he's done a lot of TV, some westerns, but he's a great actor. Another one is one of my favorite franchises is a Die Hard franchise. He was in Live Free and Die Hard. He's just a great actor. Anyway, if this is true, I would love it. I think if it's true, then he's probably just playing like a one-bit part, one episode part, maybe, I guess. People are, here's the rumor I heard, is that people think he could be, which I think is just a complete shot in the dark wish, that he could be Cad Bane. What do you think about that?
I can oddly see it.
Yeah, I know, right?
I think you are right, though, that it's a shot in the dark. Maybe it's just like a one-time cameo appearance or something. But you never know.
Never know. I've mentioned on this show that a while back, actually not on this show, on the Mandalorian podcast that I co-host, but I mentioned on there that my first thought about the person walking up to Fennec Shand in Mandalorian, my first thought was it was Cad Bane, because of the long trench coat, the spurs. You hearing the spurs? I mean, that's Cad Bane is the gunslinger. You want to talk about an actual gunslinger? Cad Bane is a gunslinger. So, yeah, maybe, yeah. Who knows?
Find out soon.
Who knows? Ahsoka series. Now, we've talked about this. That's currently in development at Disney Plus. That's been kind of rumored for a while now, but another article kind of broke this week about that. I think that's more than true. I do think they're trying to do a lot of stuff with Ahsoka.
And that's a smart move for them.
100%. Leading into what I wanted Hannah to kind of share was her Clone Wars thoughts on this final season, and particularly the Siege of Mandalore. So what were overall season 7, final season, and then, of course, Siege of Mandalore? Go ahead.
So at the final season, it oddly felt like it picked off where the last season left off. It just... It was still fluid. Obviously, there are a couple of stories that you wish they continued on, but they only had a certain number of episodes. And I won't lie, in the beginning, I was very, very nervous when we saw where they started and all that. I was thinking, how the heck are we going to get to Order 66? we're here and then we're there. How is this all going to tie together? And they did it beautifully. It didn't feel rushed at all. And I know we talked about this last time, but still that fight between Maul and Ahsoka is one of the best Star Wars fights. And the fact that it was motion capture even made it more cinematic.
Yes.
And then the end of the season entirely, I was a blubbering mess, not because it was the end of Clone Wars, but just it was beautifully told. And I loved how the last bit of that episode, there was barely any dialogue.
Yeah, that's right.
Just visual. And Casey called it.
Yeah.
He called it. And that was also not, that wasn't cheesy. That wasn't overdone. I think they did a really good tribute and tied a nice little bow on that package.
Very good, very good. And so I do want to ask you a question. I warned you before we started recording that I haven't prepped you for this question at all, because I got asked by a really good friend of mine yesterday, and it kind of stuck with me because I didn't expect it. But I answered it truthfully, and I felt like I answered it correctly. But, you know, that's my opinion. Here's the question. Is there anything about the sequel trilogy, 7, 8, 9, that is better than the Siege of Mandalore?
That is better?
Basically, are any of the prequels, or I'm sorry, are any of the sequels better than what we got in Siege of Mandalore?
No.
That's the way I answered it. I answered it the same way.
No. No,
Yeah.
and I think part of that is because, and this is just my personal opinion, I love Star Wars, you know.
Yeah.
But the 7, 8, 9 is still, in my opinion, the worst of the 3 trilogies. Just because personally to me, it's very disjointed, and I know that there's not really one person that bears all the fault on that.
Yeah.
It broke it apart, and it's sad. And while Ben Solo's character redemption is my favorite part of that trilogy, Ben Solo is my favorite part of that trilogy. It's not better than Siege.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I answered the same way. I said about pure story. Yeah, that Siege of Mandalore was just a better story, and I think there's a lot of good things about the sequel trilogy, but all in a whole, and with the stories and all that stuff, I would if you gave me a 2-hour version of the Siege of Mandalore, I would put that in first every time.
Please.
Yeah, I know, right? Somehow I think that we'll get that, but maybe not. I don't know. But if they just made a movie out of that, I mean, it does well, you know. So that was an interesting question. I thought, you know, it was weird because I was just texting with a buddy of mine, and you know, all of a sudden that question came through in the text. I was like, huh. And my response was no. I mean, it's no. It's better, and it gives it, and then we just obviously we got into discussions about why it's better, and I think, you know, I think Filoni is a rock star right now. I think he understands Star Wars better than anybody. You know, you can argue whether or not can he do a live action show or a live action movie. I mean, you can argue that for sure. He doesn't have full experience like some of these other filmmakers, but when it comes down to telling stories, when it comes down to characters and advancing them and making you care about them, I mean, besides George, I don't know anybody else has done it better. You know, the Clone Wars, yes, I feel like it's very popular with the Star Wars fandom. You know, I think there's still a lot of fans that haven't even experienced it. But it will be one of those shows that I think 20 years from now people will look back and be like, "Wow, there's some good stuff in that show," you know.
Absolutely.
So that is what's that?
I said, good question.
Yeah, good question, right? Besides that, the only thing I'll mention, I mean, it's nothing really. Well, you actually brought it up. It's funny that you said Star Wars. Today you watched Empire. Empire is approaching its 40th anniversary here in just like 3 days. The 21st, I think, is when it got released theatrically around the world. Actually, it's funny because I looked it up. It opened on only. I think it opened on just 41 screens in 16 cities on May 21st, 1980. So May 21st was actually Casey's birthday this week. So yeah, so I'll have to watch Empire in honor of Casey and Star Wars.
Oh, absolutely.
Empire Strikes Back.
That will be a must.
Yeah, I it is top of my list as well. I'm with you. Although I think I said it on the show last week. My favorite though, because I watched it that evening, was Rogue One. Right. So I actually really love Rogue One. I think it's really good. Anyway, Empire's like 1A.
Seriously, that high?
Yes, Rogue One is so good. Anyway, that's a whole other episode. We'll get into that. Okay, let's dive into this because there's a lot to get into. Our main topic here, the Rise of Skywalker. So, I think like Hannah, we both walked out of it enjoying the movie. I really did enjoy the movie. Regardless, I'm still a huge J.J. Abrams fan.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's a great filmmaker. I think he's a great visual director, and I think he does understand. He understands how to make a movie, and I think he understands how to tell a story and get from one place to the other. I just think that there wasn't, like you said, I don't think there was an overall plan for how to outline this 7, 8, 9. I remember hearing George Lucas when he was writing the original Star Wars, he made an outline of 1, 2, and 3 basically. So he knew where it came from, and then he had an outline for where he was going. And so, I mean, that just makes sense, right? I mean, it makes sense storytelling, right? So I just don't think that happened. I think that, JJ was finishing episode 7 when Ryan was already pretty much ready to shoot episode 8. And 9 was getting done by somebody completely else, Colin Trevorrow, who ended up not even doing it. So then it got reversed. Anyway, so very disjointed. Anyway, we got what we got. People do love the films. People do love 8, not 9. Love 9, not 8. It's like, I feel like everybody loves 7. I mean, it made the most money. It made $2 billion. But anyway, we get to the book, and I don't think you've read the other movie books. Hannah, have you?
I have not had a chance to yet.
Yeah. So they're all pretty similar. There's not really much difference in them. I think Solo actually has a lot of the big differences because it has a lot of the deleted scenes that we've heard about. It's got extended scenes. For example, I think the big one in Solo that they didn't put in the movie that would have made it a ton better is that at the end, towards the end, the coaxium that Enfys Nest finally gets, there's a scene where she actually takes it to Saw Gerrera. And little Jyn Erso is standing there next to Saw Gerrera. I mean, that would have been awesome. Anyway, so they missed out on that. I think that with the Rise of Skywalker, there was when they talk about expanded edition, it truly was expanded.
Oh, yes.
Right? And we're going to dive into that right now. So what we're going to do is just kind of go through some points that I know you took a lot of notes. I'm kind of going to piggyback off you, Hannah, because I think you're going to probably lead this charge a little bit.
Oh no.
Well, I mean, I think the first one. Well, I know the first one you have as one of your points. One of your things was Rey's father.
Mm-hmm.
Now, before we get into that, I think the first one I wrote down because I think it happened first in the book, which was a little disjointed from the movie. Because in the movie starts off with Kylo finding the Wayfinder and then ultimately finding the Emperor. Well, actually, the book starts off with Rey, and it starts off with Rey's training, right? And it goes into this really big backstory of Leia's training.
Yes.
Really early on. I don't know how much did that surprise you, and how much did you like that better, that balance of the beginning?
I honestly liked it a lot more, and for obvious reasons, they couldn't do it in the movie.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking. I'm glad Leia was in it, period.
Why don't you think they could have done it in the movie?
Because Carrie Fisher was
deceased.
Oh,
well, true. Well, I mean,
obvious.
Well, the first thing was, would you rather have started the movie with Rey or started the movie how they did?
I honestly feel like start the movie how they did, because it feels like traditionally after the credits roll, it always starts with some sort of action scene or some sort of spaceship type of dealio going on. So to me, that just felt like it was continuing a pattern. Book-wise, though, I'm really glad they started with Rey. It set a completely different tone. And then it also was a lovely tip of the hat to Princess Leia.
Yeah, right.
It was just a lovely tip of the hat. And it set a whole different tone for the book that I don't think would have worked for the movie.
Okay, I can go with that. Okay, so then, back to Leia. You're right. They couldn't have done a lot of that with her, obviously. But I just felt like we got just so much, because we did get that quick flashback of that towards the end, where Luke is talking about her, which was a complete surprise, I feel like, to everybody watching, right? I mean, did Leia ever get trained? We have that answer now, but she only got trained for, I feel like it's only been it was only like a year.
It wasn't that long, no.
Yeah, it wasn't that long. So, but in this beginning of the book, you got so much more insight on her thought process and a little bit of what Luke was trying to train her and how he was trying to train her and push her and all this stuff. I mean, I don't know. It's just, it makes you really appreciate more their relationship, because we didn't really get them in the sequels at all, like together, right? She was looking for him for so long, and then the only time she actually saw him was a vision of him, wasn't a projection of him, wasn't actually him. So, I don't know. I thought it was good. What is that where you're at?
That is completely where I'm at. I loved all the extra Leia bits throughout the book, because it felt like it needed it, and you're completely right. And I think now that you mention it, that's why I liked it so much, is that we got more of that sibling interaction. That, I mean, let's be honest, we didn't really even get the sibling interaction in the original trilogy.
Right. Not really. Yeah.
Not really until the end of Return of the Jedi.
I know. Right. Yeah.
So I feel like that's what we were all craving.
Right. Which is a little bit of a side note. I got to get you reading the comics, because the comics right now, the Star Wars series that they do, the first one took place, it filled in the gap between episode 4 and 5, that 3-year gap there. And now the current one is in that gap between 5 and 6. And there's a lot more interaction with Leia and Luke, and it's so good. So that's where you do get, but again, you're not getting that. Every fan isn't getting that, right? So it's good to find out in a novel like this, and ultimately, I wish they could have done it in the movie, that they did spend time with each other, that they did grow up they try to grow as a family together, and ultimately, it's a complete side note, but ultimately that's where my feelings about the sequel trilogy start getting a little cracked is because I know it's about the new cast, but the original cast, we just didn't see enough of them. I feel like we didn't in Luke and Leia, we didn't get enough of them. You know what I mean? So, but let's get into your big point that you wrote in. So, what's your point about Rey's father?
So that answers the question of whether or not Palpatine actually had someone in his life. And it's really interesting that she has Palpatine's genes, but she's also technically a clone, I guess. And you just kind of sit there and go, like, don't get me wrong, that's really creative. That's out there. I don't think any of us would have guessed that, although my husband and I did predict that because of that one scene in The Last Jedi where you see the various different versions of, or all of the different Reys, that snap scene.
Snapping, yes.
Yeah. One, she's alone, but two, she's a clone. So we thought it was a mixture of Skywalker and of Anakin and Palpatine's DNA, and that's where Rey came from.
Ah, okay.
So we're like, okay, we were half right, but
yeah, no.
I don't know. To me, it sort of came out of left field, but it sort of didn't. It answered questions, but then it was like, where was that in the movie? We didn't even get a hint of that in the film.
Yeah.
And
yeah, that was a major issue whenever I was listening to this, is that this is to me, I don't even know how to say it, but I would say extremely relevant information.
Yes.
That every viewer should have gotten somehow.
Absolutely. And like cloning technology, it's not the idea that he was a clone that is surprising, because we've seen the clone structure happen. But the fact that he was trying to create a vessel.
Yes. Right.
It took it to the next level, and I love the fact that they were trying to branch out into cloning and what it could be, and how does someone who follows the dark side of the Force live forever?
Mm-hmm.
Live forever,
right?
And it's definitely an interesting concept, but in reading it, I'm like, tell me more.
Yeah.
I almost felt like the book didn't give me enough about it. It just gave a little taste.
Yeah, because we the only thing we got in the movie was we got Dominic Monaghan's character saying, cloning the secrets only the Sith knew, which that's kind of off too, because the Kamonians knew cloning, so it's not just a Sith thing unless they taught them how to do that. But that doesn't make sense, because we heard Dexter say them cloners, right? So I mean, it's like Kaminoans are known for cloning, so. To say that the secrets the Sith knew, that's fine. But I think the secret that the Sith knew maybe was how was he able to survive the Death Star and transfer his consciousness across the galaxy, which is another point we'll talk about later, because that's in the book too.
Yes.
But this is interesting, because I'm with you, because when you're kind of told in the movie that he's a clone. But then you find out Rey's his granddaughter. So I didn't put it together at all that Rey, that Rey was the daughter of a failed clone of Palpatine. Like, that is major different news, right?
Wait, what?
Yeah.
It's not really, because it was a vessel, it's almost like she wasn't his granddaughter, she was his daughter. She was him.
Yes.
It's not, oh, you're just my granddaughter. It's not, you're kind of me.
Yes, that's kind of where, that is exactly where it gets a little confusing about that, because in that, now the book, I will say that the book, and you kind of highlighted these lines, but it talks about that the Sith followers were creating clones out of strands, DNA strands and whatnot, and they just kept failing. They kept failing. They kept failing. But then one was right, but it wasn't identical. Like it wasn't Palpatine, is what they kind of claim, right? So that's why and it wasn't still strong enough to hold his power, so they kind of casted him out. But they kept an eye on him because maybe he could produce a vessel through the bloodline. I mean, that was how they explained it. But man, that is major explanation.
I mean, I'm reading it right here. It's what, in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 paragraphs they tell us all this. There is so much missing, and part of me wonders, will they do a spinoff where we see Palpatine's son? And you would think that if that clone didn't work, they weren't going to find a clone that would.
Right.
So
yeah,
that's
very true.
Too, is how did they get to that point? And
yeah, I don't know. So that kind of piggybacks into your next point here, which is how did Palpatine survive? So for people that aren't familiar with it, Palpatine, and correct me if I'm wrong because I forgot to look it up again, but I remember when I listened to it that the method of him surviving was explained at the end, towards the end, where Rey kind of got the vision of the whole process. Is that do I remember that correctly? I think where I thought it was towards the end when she was kind of coming back to life,
yes.
And she got the vision of like his whole thing, and that's when she realized like, no, I need to defeat this. I don't want to be associated with this, or take up the dark mantle or whatever.
Yes.
But so basically what happened is he learns, as in Palpatine learns how to basically cheat death, which is what he talks about. Now, here's the thing. I love the concept because it connects all the way back to the prequels.
Yes.
Right? So and he even says the same line, right? To cheat death is the pathway to many abilities some consider to be unnatural. I loved how he repeated that line, and I love the fact that we're tying all these movies together, but you still don't explain what it means to cheat death, right? Mm-hmm. And so what he's able to do is, as he's falling down the Death Star shaft that Vader throws him down, he basically projects his consciousness out of that body all the way across the galaxy to Exegol, where this unfinished clone is waiting for him. So a lot of people had the question mark going into Rise of Skywalker when they first saw him, is that the same body or is that a clone body? Because we're never technically told. Mm-hmm. In the book we are. So anyway, what do you want to talk about with that?
So with that, in reading it in the book, I was like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. I would have loved for Rey to at least had a vision where, you see him falling down and then maybe he shuts his eyes and then opens his eyes and a new clone.
That would have been awesome.
That is all you needed to communicate. And we already know that this is possible to some degree because we saw Luke did it in The Last Jedi.
Yeah.
He didn't put his force into another item. So that's taking item, clone, being, whatever, vessel. So that's taking it to the next level. You're building off of it. And, in watching, you're still so confused of how he did it. And you just sort of accept that it's this mythical idea that we just don't know about because we don't study the dark side. That's grandma's secret recipe over there. So in reading it in the book, I actually went, whoa! Like I actually kind of in an audible gasp, scream type of noise because it made sense.
It did.
It made sense.
And I love what you just said about that because that is so true. Like Luke's projection ability is basically that ability. I mean, that is actually very true. I love that. So but and I love the fact that I love the idea of Rey seeing of a quick vision of that, or you could have done the other way. You could still have that vision, but you could have done it in the very beginning when Kylo finds him.
Oh, absolutely.
Kylo could have simply said, is this really you? And he could have said, no, it's my conscious, but it's a different body. That's it. And you have the explanation, right? So I don't know. I think they missed a little bit on that. I think I was one of those, I think, rare ones. Not rare ones, but I joined the whole crowd saying that I was excited that Palpatine was back.
Mm-hmm.
I think he needed to be back.
Oh, absolutely.
But I think I'm one of the few that, that was okay with what I got in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
But that was before I read the book. So
yep.
Now it's like, what? Anyway.
You and I are in the same boat. A lot of the things in the movie, I was like, oh, that's because there's a time jump. Oh, that's because it's a different director. Oh, that's because Carrie Fisher's gone. Oh, that's because, that's because it's the dark side. Oh, that's you just start, you're kind of like, whatever. And then I got excited and hit my computer.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, when I read the book, I'm like, oh, come on.
Yeah.
You missed an opportunity.
Yeah. 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 I don't know. And I mentioned this before, that the book came out 3 months, I think, after the movie. So I'm surely they didn't put this stuff in after the movie, but maybe they did. I don't know.
Let's choose to believe they didn't.
Right. Yeah. I would think they would have had this, anyway. So the next thing is, you mentioned you have a little thing here about the Knights of Ren. I'll let you kind of lead that one. What were your thinking on that?
One thing that I really missed out on, and I think you and I were actually talking about this when we first saw the Rise of Skywalker, is we hear all about the Knights of Ren. We hear that they're these fantastic fighters, and we finally get some of their action in the book. And They are fantastic fighters. Honestly, that was just a little thing of great, was able to get it there. Wish I could have got it in the movie. And why didn't they just at least add at least one of those interactions so we can be like, oh yeah, they are totally the cool boy team, and they're amazing warriors.
Yes.
All we get is a fight with Ben Solo at the end, and we're left in the theater going, that's it?
Yeah.
It's the Knights of Ren?
Yes. 3 movies we were built up to them, and nothing. There is a little bit more in here with them. Again, and there's more of them in the comic, The Rise of Kylo Ren. But again, they're touted as this kind of just here's the thing that's kind of misleading too, is that it's kind of hinted in The Force Awakens when Luke is explaining. It's is in Last Jedi, I guess, early Last Jedi, but he's explaining to Rey that I woke up to my temple on fire, and Ben and a handful of my students have left. Right? So it's kind of under the impression that those are some of his students. The Knights of Ren was formed out of Ben, and I don't know if you kind of thought that, but that's what my impression was when I heard that.
That's an interesting point.
Yeah. But we know now, again, it's not known in the movies, but it's known in literature, because of the comic books. We know that a handful of his students didn't become the Knights of Ren. They were the ones that went after Ben Solo for destroying the temple. So it's, I don't know if they meant it that way, but the Knights of Ren were already established prior to Ben Solo becoming Kylo Ren. They are Force sensitive. They're not Sith, but they are Force sensitive. So They do. They are. I mean, there's 6 of them. They're powerful people. So we just don't get a chance to see that. I feel like in the Rise of Skywalker, we see them lurking, and we see them like. Give me the scene where they attack Chewbacca and capture him. Like, give me that scene.
Absolutely. And I mean, just the one simple line of not warriors then, more like butchers, that helps reinforce the whole fact of, oh, they're not Jedi. Oh, they're not, they're not necessarily Sith.
Yeah.
They just are force sensitive, hence why they can fight so well. So
exactly right.
That line, and it's, as you said, it's one of those things where it's like, give us that one bit. Give us one bit.
Okay, so then after that, we did a little bit of talking about her, but mainly let's get back to Leia, and specifically the moment you're talking about, which is a little more insight into her connection with Ben. So, what did you feel like was missing out of the movie with this?
So, I mean, and this was more of an afterthought after watching the movie, but what I loved about the book is she's planned to save her son all along. She's always planned to do that. That was her last resort plan, was to basically give her life so her son could be redeemed.
Yeah.
But the other part that I really loved about this is we got more of that sibling interaction between Leia and Luke. We got to see Leia with more force sensitivity. And I think that's the other part of the movie that I think was missing was, sure, Leia was training Rey, and of course there are reasons why we couldn't get this, but I wanted Leia to have more force abilities. I wanted to see more of that. We get a taste of it here and there, and then in the book, it just throws it at your face that she's as powerful as her brother in the Force. She just chooses not to use it that much. Yes.
I totally agree with you. I think I wish we would have gotten more. Like, she has, like, towards the end there, like, she was having conversations with Luke.
Yes.
And why couldn't we have that? Like, when she gets kind of, distraught and Connix is helping her. I mean, at that point, she's been communing with Luke. I mean, Luke's basically telling her, like, it's time. You can do this. And she's like, no, there's still so much left to do. And he even says, there's only one thing left, and then you can rest. It's like, God, how awesome would that been? I mean, or even take it a step further. Like, I think it would have made, well, I guess you couldn't reveal him that way because it would have been prior to when we saw Luke. But like, if she would have saw him as a Force ghost, and had that, oh man, I mean, that's how powerful that would have been.
That would have been awesome, and just that little exchange right there, that would have been awesome. And
exactly.
And then her realizing what hope really was, and how, she had to let go. It was time to let go and let this next generation rise up. I mean, yeah. I teared a bit at that, because that's a leader. That's a leader saying, look, I've trained you as much as I can. It's time to let you go. And in a weird kind of circular way, it brings back to the way of the Jedi, where you try to detach yourself from, different things. And she and Luke have found that balance of learning to let go, but still love and still care.
Yeah. Yeah.
They were able to find that balance. And I think that was a nice little ending for her, in the fact of she learned to let go, but still care.
Agreed. Yeah. Now, I don't know if you thought this when you first watched the movie, but when I first watched it, and we see Rey, hovering there with the rocks, and she comes down, and she's like, I can't hear him. And Leia's talking to her, be patient or whatever. To me, though, when Rey actually is the one that says, I'm going to do the training course again. Mm-hmm. And I still, at that point, like, I didn't catch on that Leia was training her. Like, I didn't get that. Even when it wasn't until she says, yes, master, kind of towards it, I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Leia's training her? Like, how is that? How does she even know? Because like, we never knew Leia to be a trained Jedi, right? So
Right.
So when I first saw the movie, I didn't come to that conclusion that Leia had been training Rey this whole time. Like I did not come to that conclusion until when we see the flashback of Luke and Leia. Then it's like, oh, okay, so she has been trained a little bit, but still, even at that point, it still hasn't been fully. It wasn't never fully explained in the movie that she's been training her this whole year.
Right. I mean, I kind of caught it, and I wish I took a picture of that page because I don't remember the words verbatim. But she said something along the lines of like, you need more patience or you need more time. And when we first see her in the movie, and that's actually when I thought, wait, she's training her? And then when we called her master, I was like, that is confirmed. She was her master.
But see, to me, what would have been simpler was if Leia would have said, now I know she's dead, so it's hard to do that. But if Leia would have said, do the training course again,
good point.
Then to me, she's training her. She's telling her to do stuff. When she's like, I'm going to do the training course again, it's like, okay, well, she's going to go train herself. That's kind of how I interpreted it, but that was me being kind of misinterpreting.
No, I mean, hindsight 2020 for me personally, because after watching all of it and be like, oh, she was trained in the Force, I always took it as, with Rey saying that, and not only because of obvious reasons, was because Leia was, even though she is naturally gifted in the Force, she hasn't fought with a saber in a while.
True.
So she's a little rusty on that. Therefore, Rey would have the initiative to say, I'm going to do the training course, while Leia would be more of the mind, the mental side of the Force.
Yes. Now, do I remember this correctly, if it's in this book, and tell me if I'm wrong, but is there a reference, I think there's a reference in this book to the end of The Last Jedi, where Rey is sitting there with the broken saber, because I think this is actually a good connection. But Rey's sitting there with the broken saber. Leia comes over. Remember what Leia says to her, because Rey's like, "What do? Luke's gone. We have nothing." And Leia puts her hand on her and says, "We have everything we need." And she's referencing, "I am going to train you now." I mean, that to me is great. I love that. But
I did not catch that. That is awesome,
isn't it? But I mean, can you put that together from the movies? I don't know. I can't. You can't, right?
No. You unless you have great insight.
Yeah. I think you have to talk directly to the filmmakers on that point. But
I mean, maybe there's something in the screenplay if you read it, but
was that in the book at all? I can't remember if I read that part. Like, if Rey remembered that point of when Leia told her, I think that's there's something in there about that. So that's the only place I can think I heard that or why that comes to mind was that she had mentioned when that happened that she took her under her wing at that point. I think it's in the beginning when Leia was. I can't remember. I really can't remember. It's been a little while since I listened to this thing.
I think you're right.
But I thought that was a great connection. I think that again. I just think there could have been just a few more lines. There could have been just a few more references to Leia, not just the flashback. Because I think the only thing the flashback does, because we don't see that until Luke gives her the saber. Mm-hmm. I think the only thing the flashback actually really does is just it to me. It just shows the nostalgic time of when Luke and Leia were together and they were training to be Jedi together. I don't necessarily, I mean, he's explaining that's when she hung it up because she felt like, something bad was going to happen to Ben. And I don't know how important that is. I think the importance of it, I think we could have learned sooner that she had this training Luke, because that's what she's trying to do to Rey is become that mentor. I don't know. Maybe, in JJ's way, he was trying to subtly say that, but I just think it could have been a little more direct.
Oh, I completely agree.
Like the book is, basically.
Yes.
Okay, that's a big point. I mean, I think that's a big discussion there. I mentioned, I think your next things are kind of some Easter eggs, but and I mentioned earlier about, I had it on my notes, but we kind of already talked about it, which was Rey's vision of Palpatine surviving, and because again, there's a point in the book towards the end where she gets this whole thing downloaded, and I want to say, I keep saying it's that part where right before she basically grabs the other saber and attacks back. It's when she's laying there, and she's right before she gets all the visions of the Jedi and the voices. Like, she sees the whole thing, like how he survives, how her father and her mother, save her basically, and she realizes she's this good person, and I want to say that's I take that back. I think it's actually before that. I could be totally wrong, but and Hannah, maybe you could correct me if I'm wrong. I actually think it's the part where right before she gives the saber to Ben, because in the trailer where she's in the end of the trailer, that shot of her face where she's like really content, and Luke, you hear Luke's "The Force will be with you always" kind of thing. That's the moment in the book, I think, that she sees all of this, and she realizes, and then she realizes Ben's there, and she realizes, okay, I'm going to, because she's supposed to be striking him down at that point, right, and taking him out. But then she realizes, that's not what I'm going to do. Ben's here to help. We're going to take you down, blah, blah, blah. Anyway. So, I don't know. I just thought I thought that would have been really, like you mentioned, I thought that would have been really cool to see him falling and flat, whatever. Another point, just a side point for you, has nothing to do with the book, really. I wanted your thoughts on this, because I mentioned to Casey that now that I've watched it a few times, I'm a little confused why, if he's not a clone, but if he gets, if he figures out that this dyad is restoring him, why doesn't he get restored to prior to the lightning strike? Like, why doesn't he get restored all the way to episode 3 Palpatine? You know what I mean? Before the Mace Windu fight? Like, to me, that would make more sense.
Maybe he just realized that, and I mean, I have no answer. I can only give a speculation, is that he realized the only form that could contain all of his power was the form that he was last in.
Ah, that could be true.
I mean, that's kind of the thing that I was like, okay.
The other theory I have is, this was a theory that went around after episode 3 actually came out. There was really no social media then, so it was kind of just amongst fans and stuff at celebrations and stuff like that. But the theory that went around was that the way he looks, the way we know the Emperor to look, like in episode 6, Return of the Jedi, like in episode 3, like actually some point in between 2 and 3, like that was actually his true form. And he was using the dark side to conceal his look to everybody else. So when he was like getting force lightning back, like he revealed his true self, which for a while there, I thought, wow, that's actually pretty interesting.
That's really cool.
Right? Which would then make sense. If he's getting restored to his actual true form. Right. Which is
yeah, so maybe that's just been his true form, and maybe he's just been alive for a very long time already, so
It's true. We don't know. Yep. We don't know. So anyway, but that's nothing like that's in the book. So you marked down some Easter eggs, which I thought was pretty cool. one of the first things was, which I needed you to remind me of this. So, talk about the dark saber, Rey's dark side saber.
Yes, that was another moment where I made an audible like "ah!" type of. As soon as I read it, I just found that so interesting that the saber she wanted to create all along, which is part of the whole, the whole process of becoming a Jedi is creating your own saber, and we see in the Clone Wars how that is done by you imagining how it feels in your hand.
Yes.
And what do you visualize it as? And that's what she visualized it. And that was the saber that we see Dark Rey wielding later on. It was that double staff.
Yes.
And it's just, you're sitting there going, holy crap. So I don't know why the saber she was envisioning ended up being the Dark Rey saber. All I can think of is that was, once again, a subconscious war between the light and dark side of the Force and Rey.
Yeah. Well, it just makes sense because it justifies her reactions to not becoming that. I mean, if she sees the person holding the one thing that she's trying to create, then it's more believable that it's like, oh, I am going to become this dark person.
Right.
Which makes it then, again, kind of backs up the choice of leaving and going and exiling herself on Ahch-To, right? So,
right.
I mean, it lends itself, even though I think it's a little bit of a weak argument in the movie, but and you can't really get that feeling in the movie either that she was building that. So, but that was a good one.
You can't unless you kind of snuck it on our workbench, which I think we see her other saber at the workbench.
We do. Yeah, the one she ends up having. Yeah.
See it?
Yeah.
Which is also interesting that she envisions one saber, but she's building another.
Yeah. Well, I think it mentions in the book that she had to abandon, or she's something like, she ends up going a different route because of some reason. I don't know. I can't remember, but she ends up building the one she currently has. Yeah.
I love the line, two business ends, maybe with a hinge in the middle for portability.
Yes. That's great.
Loved it. So that was an Easter egg.
The next one is pretty crazy because I think I had the same reaction you did when I read it. Was the First Order, what was part of their plan with building their army that, again, you don't get in the movie, but you get in the book, is that we're told in the book that one of the strategies was to actually kidnap the kids of the heroes. So, hence, when Lando's talking to, Jannah there, Jannah's talking about being separated, from birth, and Lando has which it's never told in there, but Lando has a 2-year-old daughter that got stolen from him. Mm-hmm. He's assuming, I think he understands that it's probably the First Order that did that, because he mentions in the book, they turned our kids into our enemies. Lando said in a defeated voice, my girl, Han and Leia's son Ben, to kill the spirit of the rebellion for good. I mean, interesting strategy. Which means, same thing happened to Finn, basically, right? Stolen from birth, from his parents and whatnot. So, I don't know. I mean, this kind of, like you said, I think this even more justifies that Jannah could probably be his daughter. I don't know. Is that what you were thinking, I guess?
Oh, absolutely. And honestly, when I was watching the movie, that last moment they share at the end, I actually thought they were father and daughter.
Yeah.
Because it was almost a subconscious. He was looking at her as a daughter. She was looking up to him. And I was like, he just found his daughter. And then in reading the book, there's even, they never say that she is his daughter, if I remember correctly, but there's a lot to allude to the fact.
Oh, yeah.
That it's his daughter. There are a lot of extra pieces of dialogue that just connect those dots.
Yes. No, they're definitely laying the groundwork, I feel like. And as soon, I mean, literally the first showing, the opening night, as soon as I saw that scene, I leaned over I told my wife, I was like, that's a Disney Plus series right there. Like,
Please.
Jana, I guarantee it. I guarantee that's going to be a Disney Plus series.
It should.
Yeah. Okay, next one. What's the next one you got?
Foreshadowing that life force truly does pull from the giver. That was one thing that kind of didn't make sense to me early on in the movie, and then all of a sudden it changed at the end, where we don't really see Rey have a moment of, I gave up some of my life to this snake creature. And then later on, when she essentially saves Ben from death, healing his wound, once again, there is no effect. And then all of a sudden at the end, Ben dies after giving his life force over to her.
Yes.
It's kind of like, wait, how did we get from point A to W? Like, where that makes no sense. While in the book, after she healed the creature, Rey wasn't in a hurry to get to the surface, though. Her breath came fast. Her very bones ached with weariness and unaccountability. Her hands stung. Healing the Vexes had felt so normal and natural and right, but it had cost her.
Yes.
That's because I think it shows that, there is a price. Mm-hmm. There is a price to essentially taking life from the Force versus, you could live forever, like Palpatine says with the dark side. So it just emphasizes that with the Force, it is not natural to live a long life. There is a price to be paid.
Right.
So once again, it was after reading it in the book, it's like, where was this in the movie? Where were the stakes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that wasn't clear enough either. You're right. And it could have been very subtle. You could have just had her energy be down, or even mention it that took a piece of me or something like that. I don't know. It could have definitely been explained a little bit better.
Well, I mean, like, she had that throwaway line to BB-8 of, I didn't give all of it, but I felt like that was more of a comedic line versus a man that took something out of me.
Right. Yeah. And then I can't get it back.
Right.
That's the thing. It's not like you get rejuvenated with Force. It's like a part of her is gone now. Yeah. This next one is pretty funny. The mind trick stuff.
That was just a little.
Yeah, I thought that was good.
That was good. Her Finn, when he's running out to her to help her in when Ben is there, or Kylo Ren is there, and she gives him the Force push back. But what we don't know is she gave him some mind control as to why he went back to the ship. Because I always wondered why he did. Yeah. And then later on, did she ever do that when it's with the two stormtroopers? You're happy we're here. You were expecting us. And did she ever do that to us? And then Poe has a moment of, she did.
Yes.
She totally did that to us. So it was just a little funny haha moment.
Yeah, it was good. Yeah, so you're referring to the scene where, Kylo's coming in the TIE fighter on Pisana.
Yes.
And she's walking out there, and Finn's running after her, but then all of a sudden he turns around and goes back, and that's basically, she basically force pushes him back to the ship, which is weird. But then he realizes that she has done it before. Okay, so the next one, I think, has to do with the dyad, right?
The dyad. Yes. Yeah. I just, the little line about how he was trying to create a dyad with Anakin.
Yes. So this is very interesting. Yes. So we'll read the line. Basically, the line says, it says, his gleeful triumphant thoughts washed over Rey as she struggled against his grip, unable to move. He had won at last. All those years, all that searching. He tried to create a dyad with Anakin, as his master had tried to create one with him. The rule of two. A master, always in desperate search of a yet more powerful apprentice, was a pale imitation, an unworthy but necessary successor to the older, pure doctrine of the dyad. So, yeah, this throws a complete kind of somewhat turns upside down the rule of two. Because we've been under the impression this whole time the rule of two meant simply that there was always two Sith, a master and an apprentice.
Yes.
And they were scheming this whole time, trying to figure out how to have revenge on the Jedi. As we've come to know, and this is kind of, again, a kind of a sidebar, as we've come to know, apparently the discussions out there are now is that the rule of two didn't mean necessarily that there weren't more Sith. Mm-hmm. It just meant that there was still only a master and apprentice that led all of the other Sith. Because I believe that when we get into these new stories that are coming out of the High Republic, which is a couple hundred years, I still feel like there's going to be Sith involved in that. I mean, who else can the Jedi have lightsaber battles with? I mean, they have to have lightsaber battles with Sith, right?
Right.
And then of course ultimately that explains the Inquisitors, right? They're former Jedi mainly, and they're not Sith necessarily, but they're dark side users, right? So anyway, but the dyad thing is even more of a upside down kind of twist on the rule of two. I don't know how I feel about this explanation, even though we got a little bit more what the dyad means, but the fact that he was trying to create one just really just adds more confusion a little bit to me in a way.
Oh, it totally did for me too. I mean, in reading that, I kind of had, I think I reread it quite a number of times because I almost didn't believe what I was reading. Because it's just like, wait, what? He's been trying, of course he has this, this hunger for power that will never be satisfied. So, and dyad must have been in some form of text at some point. But now we're finding out in the book that it's possibly more of a Sith ambition and that the Jedi didn't really know about it. And the Sith trying to, and it makes you think, well, maybe not the original Sith, obviously, but, maybe somewhere along the way, two Sith became the power duo because they were a dyad.
Yeah, so that's interesting.
And then it's like, okay, so that maybe they were trying to recreate it to gain that power, but it was just something that had to naturally happen?
I guess. I mean, because his next line is like unseen for generations. It's... Mm-hmm. It makes you wonder, well, who has seen it? Like, when did it happen? What did they do? What does a dyad do if they know they exist?
Right, and I mean, he probably knows of it because it's implied that Plagueis was his master, and he killed Plagueis, and therefore took on all of the memories that Plagueis had. So, and maybe that's where he learned about the dyad, and maybe that's when he was searching out someone to create a dyad, and the whole idea that maybe he helped create Anakin, that whole idea, and maybe that was his way of trying to create a new dyad. I don't, it as you said, it throws a wrench into everything that we've already known, and it just makes you think. And you're sort of there, sitting there going, I want to know more about this because I feel like you opened this can of worms and we don't know what's in it. And we need what's in it because that opens up a lot of possibilities and a lot of different trains of thought. Yeah.
I wonder if, part of me wonders if this introduction of the dyad could possibly play into what we get out of the High Republic. Like,
I'm hoping so.
Yeah. Maybe they come across this, or maybe they kind of, that's where we get more information of what this dyad means. And I mean, that's generations, that's several generations in the past. So maybe. Your last thing, which I thought was awesome, yes, was the call, the how do you say it, the roll call, right?
Yeah.
The roll call of the resistance fighters that came in. Now, this is another thing. Like, I know it would have been pure fan service to do this in the movie, but man, you should have done this in the movie.
You really should. It wouldn't have been that much too, and it would just have been the little pieces of nuggets to those that have seen it, that do know it. Otherwise, your viewer's going to be like, "Oh, that's a cool ship. Oh, that's a cool ship." Meanwhile, everyone else is like, "Whoa!"
And it's not even, when you see the ship too, it's not even fully confirmed that it's it, right? Because there's several hundred of those ships, I'm sure. But I'm just going to read it because I want people to, if they haven't heard the book or read the book, you can just imagine what you're feeling when you hear these words. Okay, here we go. So, and Hannah did a great job of sending over these notes. So it says, the comms interrupted as ship after ship began calling in. Thousands of resolved voices crying out, refusing to be silenced. Millennium Falcon standing by for orders, said Lando. Like, he didn't even say that in the movie, right? Like,
he said, like, you're not alone, kid.
You're not alone. That's it. Yeah.
Something like that.
And he laughed a little bit, I think. Like, right? So, and then you got, so Millennium Falcon standing by for orders, said Lando. Mon Calamari fleet standing by, came another voice. Phantom Squadron standing by. Ghost standing by. Anodyne 2 standing by. Poe was not the crying type, but as everyone called in, one after another, liquid pooled in his eyes. They had done it. The spark of the resistance had become a fire. Alphabet 2 standing by. Zay Versio with Inferno Squad standing by. Look at all these ships. Fireball here. Hi, everyone. Cut the chatter, Kaz, a deep voice responded. And that's it. Okay, so let's just go through these real fast. So, of course, the Falcon. Mm-hmm. I think everybody understands the Mon Calamari fleet. They're the ones that produce all the ships. I mean, Mon Calamari creates and builds a lot of ships. Home One from the original trilogy was a Mon Calamari ship, blah, blah, blah. Now, I actually had to look up and remind myself about Phantom Squadron. Do you remember Phantom Squadron? They
sounded really familiar, and I'm actually embarrassed to say I'm blanking out at the moment because I also had to look them up because I remember that name.
That's what was in Aftermath.
Yes.
Because you read the Aftermath books, right?
Yes.
So Phantom Squadron helped liberate Kashyyyk. And then, of course, they showed up at the Battle of Jakku, led by Wedge Antilles. Mm-hmm. Ghost, of course, I think everybody understands who the Ghost is. Now, who's on the ship? Like, now,
that's what I wanted to know.
Now, here's the thing. You didn't listen to the audiobook.
Right.
So when Ghost standing by is said, it actually doesn't sound like Hera. So I want to go back and listen to it again because I remember trying to listen to it a couple times, and he didn't sound like Hera. So I don't know. I'm trying to think of why they didn't do that. Anyway, now Anodyne 2 I feel like is new. I couldn't find any reference to them.
I couldn't either. That was new to me.
Alphabet 2, if people want to recall the book out there, Alphabet Squadron. I'm assuming this is the new version that we're going to get in this coming novel. Mm-hmm. Now, Zay Versio, Inferno Squad. Now, if anybody have you done Inferno Squad?
I have not done Inferno Squad, but I've heard of them, so I knew enough to get the reference.
Yes. So Inferno Squad was led by Iden Versio, who is Zay's mother, who actually defects and joins the rebellion. So Zay is her daughter, she's a character that's in the book as well as the game, Battlefront 2. Now, Fireball, of course, people are Resistance watchers. Kaz flies the Fireball, and that deep voice. Now in the audiobook, that deep voice was clearly Yeager. Clearly. It was the exact same tone, right? So, I mean, how awesome would that have been to be in the movie? Now you don't have to see them. You could have just done this, right?
And that's what, 10 seconds, maybe?
If that. Yeah, if that.
Maybe. Yeah. And then, yeah, so that was awesome. And then I also liked the Wicked nod at the end. That was my other.
Yes, you had that on there. Yeah, Wicked was huge.
Reference. But the ships, yeah, that so many references in there, so many gold nuggets. And I also feel like, I mean, you would have gotten a similar effect to hearing all of the different voices of the Jedi coming to Rey.
Yes. Yeah.
And needed it, in my opinion. But I guess maybe like the underlining point is that the book had a lot of moments you didn't realize you wanted until you read them. Right.
Yeah, I agree. Now about the voices thing too in the audiobook, I thought was very interesting is that of course he doesn't mention any names. Like in the book there's no names. The only reason we got names in the movie is because there's credits, right? Now you can pinpoint the voices. You can tell that that's Ashley Eckstein doing Ahsoka. That's Mace Windu doing, or Samuel Jackson doing Mace. Qui-Gon is, Liam Neeson. Now in the book, audiobook, he's doing his best, which he's pretty good. Mark Thompson, who narrates it, he did his best. He was doing Ewan McGregor. He was doing Obi-Wan. He was doing Anakin. He was doing Ahsoka. Now, there were a couple voices in there where you couldn't tell, which I'm assuming were either, Aya Secura or I think the other one was Luminari, Unduli, and all that stuff. So it's like he was probably doing those voices, but you just don't know. It's a little, to me, it's a little more clear in the movie, that there's these separate Jedi. But I will point out that in the book. Oh man, I should have looked it up. But there was a point in the book where it talks about that these voices, are from the past, and I think there's one and could be tied to the living or something like that, right? Did you remember that? So
I remember that. It's
basically to me hinting that Ahsoka, is not dead because everybody assumed that she must be dead if we're hearing her. Well, that's not necessarily true. But then that opens up a whole nother kind of topic of, how is that possible then that she's able to commune like that? So anyway.
Yeah.
So no, those are a lot of topics there. I guess we got to finish up with the ultimate question. I know you mentioned it, but we both are here. I think. Well, my question was, which was better? I think we're both claiming that the book is better. But do you? I guess the other question that I will change it to is, how much of those, if all of them, do you feel like, if they were in the movie, would have changed your opinion of the movie?
I don't think so.
Where you are now.
I feel like it would have made my opinion stronger with it. I still love it. I still think it is a great movie with what they could have done. And I hate to add that caveat in there.
Yeah.
But I think it would have filled a lot of the holes that didn't need to be filled with, that's just the dark side of the Force. Oh, that's because we don't have Carrie Fisher. Oh, that's just because, filling in all of those. It would have helped tell the story a little more. Yeah. And it probably would have strengthened it a lot more. And Palpatine wouldn't have felt so out of left field.
Yeah, I think there could have been. I think if you would have taken just a couple of those things that were a little bit more, a little bit more backstory, a little bit more evidence of the characters' backstory, and put those in there, I think it would have. I think it just would have went a long way with some fans and some moviegoers, right? I think ones that are coming out there like confused and not understanding why this. I think those issues would have been somewhat alleviated if they could have put some of those things in there. But I'm one of those people that when I see deleted scenes of Star Wars, it's like, oh, why delete it? Just put it in there. Keep it in there.
We don't mind being in a movie theater for 4 hours. I mean, just
no.
Put it there.
Who cares if it doesn't mean that it doesn't anything to the story? It means that I know more about that character. That's why it's the clear one I wish they would put back in is all those deleted scenes in episode 3 with Bail Organa and Mon Mothma and Padme, kind of the little quick formations of the seeds of the rebellion. It's like, God, yes, they don't ultimately contribute to what's happening in episode 3, but it does for those characters. It's phenomenal. I wish they would put that stuff back in there, but anyway, well, I hope everybody listening or watching could really appreciate now, the book side of it. And I think we've done this a lot further along since the book has been out. So hopefully we didn't spoil too much for you. I think a lot of this stuff was out there in the public, especially Palpatine's, how he survives and stuff like that. But this was definitely, an eye opener for me. I think Hannah too, of how good the story was in its totality. You know what I mean? So, I do have a different perspective now when I watch The Rise of Skywalker. Yes, I wish that some of this stuff was in there, but it does make the movie a little bit better.
Agreed.
Knowing this stuff, right? So,
agreed.
Okay. Well, Hannah, thanks for doing this. I think this was really educational. This is really good.
It was. Thank you so much. Truly appreciate it and had a blast.
So look for our new series on YouTube. We call it Council Sessions. In fact, we got a new one coming out here shortly with Cody and Casey. Their topic, I'm told, is that they're doing the EU versus the current canon. Like, which is actually better as far as the old expanded universe or this current? I don't know. I don't know what they're going to get into. But did you actually read a lot of the books from the old canon?
Oh yes.
Oh wow. So you need to get into that. You need to get into that conversation too. Then
I love Jason and Janna and Anakin and it's.
Oh wow! Cool. So Hannah will be back, I'm sure, and she'll be involved. We're going to get her involved in some of these council sessions. So basically, our council sessions are really kind of shorter pieces of content. Really, we're just taking one question and kind of answering that question between two people, so that we can keep getting you guys curious about the Star Wars universe, about some of the questions. And if you got any questions, just send them our way. One of them that we're kind of working on too, that we're going to do is, which I think is kind of interesting, especially with the end of the Clone Wars now, is simply, who is Darth Maul? Like, who is Darth Maul? Right? I mean, he started out as just an apprentice in episode 1, and we ended up getting, someone who we thought died. Now we have this whole body of work. Who has obviously become a very popular and massive character in Star Wars. So, but who is he actually? That's the question. So, anyway, that'll be a future council session. So anyway, go check that out. YouTube.com/Inside the Force. There'll be some new ones up there. And we'll be back next week for, man, we're getting close to episode 300. I cannot believe that. Holy cow. I don't know. I got to do something. I don't know what we're going to do yet. Hannah, thanks. Appreciate you for coming on. Have a great week. Everybody, thanks for listening. Go to InsideTheForce.com. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and have a great week. Stay safe, everybody. Just keep watching Star Wars. For Hannah Burr. Bye, Hannah.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. May the Force be with you.